record. Okay, it should be recording. Does it say? It does. Lovely. Okay, cool. Hi everyone. Welcome to this webinar on how to run a team racing event. Just before we start, this is very much our best advice. It's not an official line, and we're kind of running this to try and help you guys just from our own experience, really. So yeah. Ooh, there we go. So just to begin with a bit about us, I'm Emma. I'm the Boozer Chair for the next couple of years. I'm actually studying at Bristol. I'm doing a master's. And my experience when it comes to running team racing events, I ran the Bristol Brew in 2019. I ran the Western qualifiers and the playoffs in 2020. So the ones that we sort of had before COVID. And I also ran the summer champs over the summer, which hopefully I saw a few of you at. Yeah, Kate, do you want to?
So I'm Kate. I'm at Sheffield Uni. This is going to be my final year at uni, finally. And I've got experience running, we think it's at least 3 shuffles. I've helped run a trading event that didn't go ahead because of COVID. And I've also just put in a bid for Booster Qualifiers 2022.
I think before we start also, I'll just add, if you guys want to email us about anything, want to drop us a Facebook message after this, you are completely welcome to. We're sort of like here to help. Yeah, and also something else to add, we haven't got a bid for finals yet or playoffs. So if after this you're like inspired and want to host, please do think about putting a bid in. So yeah. So before we go on to the topic, we're currently looking for a team racing officer. So if you think you'd be up to it, it's about an hour of work a week, and it involves sort of overseeing all our team racing championships. Please let us know. Yeah, so today what we're going to do is we're going to go through all the stages of running a successful team racing event, from initial planning all the way through to after the event. Yeah, so we're going to go through all the steps in turn. If you have any questions, either put them in the chat, or at the end we'll have a Q&A session. So yeah, it'd be good if you want to turn your cameras on, and then it can just be a bit more of a discussion. So yeah. So for those of you that may not have been to a team racing event before, we thought we'd just stick this in. This is sort of what we both reckon is a typical team racing weekend. It might be slightly different, but this is kind of what to expect. Some clubs you might have a Friday night social for people that arrive the night before, and then on Saturday you arrive quite early in the morning for registration. You have a sort of 9:30 briefing with the race officer and chief umpire. Your first start around 10 a.m. Obviously this is really approximate. Aim for rolling starts. We've recommended so it's sort of team racing throughout the day. You finish around 4 or 5, and then you have a big Saturday night social, and then on Sunday 9:30 first start, team racing throughout the day, and then depending on the format that you choose, you might want to do, say you do a round robin and then have quarters, semi-finals, sort of really up to you, and then at about 4 o'clock you wrap up, and yeah, do a bit of a prize giving. Yeah.
So the first step to organising your event is selecting someone within your committee, or inviting somebody onto your committee to organise the event themselves. So I know Bristol has an event sec, whereas we allocate the job to our team racing captain. And so it's done differently at different unis. You need permission from your affiliated sailing club, and obviously their date needs to be clear, their diary needs to be clear for that date as well. You need support from your SU or AU, as you'll be inviting quite a lot of people into the uni, and that was especially an issue around COVID, but I think it's faded away a little bit now, but just worth running it past them. You need to decide how many flights of boats you're going to bring, and if you're going to have a race officer, you need to work out who that's going to be. So initial planning, you need to write a budget, and that budget is very dependent on the maximum entry capacity of the venue. So you're going to need to source additional flights of boats if necessary. So it depends where you're located. If you're at Lake where you just sail as the only uni, there might only be 1 flight of boats, but their school might train there as well. Yeah, you need to confirm your date with your club and complete club booking forms, and you also need to talk about a risk assessment.
I think, yeah, just to add to that, the budget is probably like the most important thing you do. I know a lot of clubs probably run an event to raise money for your club, so there is no point running an event if you're going to lose money as a club. So yeah, definitely first thing you do. So yeah.
So then deciding on how many teams you want to come is dependent on the amount of boats you're able to get. So the more teams you have coming, the more money you can make, but it's got to be a balance between quality of racing and time in the boats and making it actually worthwhile to pay entry for. So we recommend like a 1:6 ratio in terms of flights and teams. So if you've got one flight of boats, 6 teams entry, 2 flights goes to 12 team entries, and 3 flights goes to 18 team entries. This is a very useful decorated version of it on KSAIL's website, which you can sort of use to assess the time on water each of the teams will get. You also need to be aware when you're deciding this, if there's any capacity restrictions at your venue. For example, number of ribs on the water, whether your catering can only cater for a maximum number of people, and like the size of your clubhouse, changing rooms, actual physical space on the water, and stuff like that as well.
So with your budget, these are kind of things you need to include. So the income, which usually will just come from your entry fees, and then your expenditure, which sort of covers all the event costs. Obviously this will be completely different depending on venues, but the key things kind of are rib hire, committee boat use, firefly, flight hire, umpire accommodation, any umpire and volunteer expenses. So typically food and travel is covered. Damages. So when I talk about damages, I'm talking about making sure you have enough spares and having some money aside in case there is some wear and tear damages. There's miscellaneous costs, so like paper, ink, anything you might need in turn to make the event happen. We do recommend adding sort of like a 5% contingency on costs, so that if some unexpected thing happens, you kind of have a little bit of a cushion there. So when writing your budget, I think like the key things are whether you're covering your costs or not. Think about what you're aiming to achieve by running your event, because that'll help decide where your expenses are, or what other extra things you might want to include. How high quality the event will be, which very much might influence how much you charge, and also think about how much you would expect to pay entry to a team racing event yourself. Is it a reasonable entry to charge? But really, like the top one, are you covering your costs, is most important. So here's some examples. Here's one. It really doesn't have to be that complicated. You just want all the costs there, and then you can work out a worst case, best case scenario of the money that you can make afterwards and how much is left over. So here's one example, and then we also have this example. This example is actually from the summer event that we ran. You'll see that it made £5, so we very much put everything into it, but this is a little bit more complicated than the other one, but it's kind of up to you. It is worth having, so as you can see here, the budget and the actual, as you can see, the actual hasn't been filled out, but it's also very useful to work out exactly how much you made, and then in future years you can then reflect on that and see maybe where it could be different. So yeah, so hiring boats and damage deposits. The damage deposit should cover at least the excess of an insurance claim. The standard is about £300, but it's well worth having a conversation if it's your SU or AU that deal with this to make sure that it's enough. Fundamental principle, if you don't have a damage deposit at an event, the team isn't sailing. So yeah, and then insurance, check with your AU. So we're not insurance experts, and it can sort of really depend on which what your SU has, what your club policy is, but essentially make sure it covers third party liability. Yeah, Kate, do you want to say a bit more? No? we won't stop. We recommend producing a hire agreement. And
no, I think yeah, you might
I think my
I
internet
think my
might be
internet's
lagging.
gone funny.
Yeah, I'm not sure whose
I
it
don't know
is.
if you can hear me.
Could someone tell us in the chat, kindly, please? Okay, let's just keep going. I'm not sure whether it's mine.
Can anyone hear?
Okay, it's Kate. You can hear me. Okay. So right, I'll just keep going. So sorry about that, guys. You can all hear me. Lovely. So insurance for boats must cover third-party liability. Check with your SU AU. So we do recommend you produce a hire agreement. In this hire agreement, so again, I'm going to give you an example in a minute, but essentially you want to cover making sure you know who's responsible for the boats, who's responsible for the repairs, condition and damage, using the damage deposits, and also how the boats are going to be transported, just to make sure that there's no issues that come up. And yeah, because obviously the sharing of boats is so important for many clubs to run their events, so just making sure that there's agreement in place so nobody's worse off. We recommend you run it past your SU. The RA legal team have also said they're happy to do it. You know, we're here, like, we'll give you examples, but we're not legal experts, so completely don't rely exactly on what we say. It's well worth running it past them, but I will give you an example anyway. So this is one that was used at qualifiers a couple of years ago. It was actually written by Karen and Abby, who were the last like chair and vice chair. So essentially it's just covering, you know, the boats, what they're provided, when it's going to be provided for, how much you're going to pay, who's going to deal with fuel expenses. Then we have also to do with the damage, condition of the boats, how you're going to determine damage and responsibility, when a damage deposit is going to be used, and then how a boat's going to get to and from the venue, and then signed on behalf of each of the clubs. As I said, highly recommend you run it past your SU before you agree anything. Yeah. So then also finally the risk assessment. So this is the example that we actually, I think we shared with everyone at the summer champs. So this is kind of just stuff to include. So you've got your hazards. Obviously this is just like a little extract of it, but hazard, who's the hazard affecting, what's the risk level before you mitigate, what are your mitigations, risk level after mitigation, and then any notes which might be relevant to running the event. Yeah, Kate.
Can everyone hear me again now? I hope you can. So next step, so after you've got your basic sort of event set out, you need to decide and appoint some umpires. So that will depend on the number of flights you choose. I would typically try and get at least one spare in there. So if you've got 3 flights, have 4 umpires. That depends on the quality of the event, except I'm off the water to eat some lunch without stopping race station for them. The earlier you book accommodation, the cheaper it is. So it's a way to save money on your event there. You need to decide which one's going to be your chief umpire. So like be in charge of the umpiring overall. You also need to release your notice of race and entry forms. So you can do that on your Facebook event, where you can email all the teams coming, set an entry deadline. What details do you need on the entry form? So I recommend like having an email address, having a phone number, knowing how many teams. Have I gone?
You still there? No, you're still here. I'll so you release a notice of raise and entry forms.
Still here. Okay.
Shall I finish the slide? Oh my goodness, internet. I'll keep going. So release the notice of raise and entry forms.
Yeah, you finish the slide. I'm going to go out and reconnect again.
Okay. Sorry about this. Release the notice of raise and entry forms. Yeah, set entry deadline. What details do you need? Early entry discount. Like your entry forms are probably quite standard, but thinking about, you know, who the teams are, getting details in terms of social numbers, people who need accommodation, yeah, there are examples of notice of races. We haven't included one here, but as you can see, there's a link below with some templates, and we'll include that link after. And like if you want an example, just like send one, like send us an email, and we'll very happy to send one over. Other next steps, so event promotion, making a Facebook event, of course, add it to the Boozer calendar. Think about catering. Have you got catering available on site? Are they happy to accommodate you? And then also plan the social, whether that's you that does it or your social sex, however your committee works. Yeah, that's sort of what we recommend around now. I've just given you a little promo example. So this is for the Bristol Brew. So basically, where is it? When is it? What should you expect? And contact details. Is sort of all you sort of need to say. So after entry closes, things to do. So pick your teams. If you're oversubscribed, do you need sailing CVs? Probably not really applicable at the moment because none of us have sailing CVs after COVID, but maybe sort of in a year's time, it's something to think about. Once entry fees are received, confirm your entries. That's something that's really key. Team hasn't entered until they've paid, and that's really important. Contact Keith at KSL about schedules. We'll include all his details at the end, but Keith has got loads and loads of resources which are really, really helpful in running an event. And also accommodation for teams. I don't know how, so certainly in the West, and I think Kate said in the North as well, essentially, you know, you go to an event and they provide the accommodation. So it's worth thinking about that, making sure you've got enough people that will host. So yeah. So moving on to your team running the event sort of on the day. This is sort of what we recommend, but obviously it can slightly change depending on how you normally run things, what your venue requires, how many teams you've got. But you have the race committee, which tends to be your race officer and sort of like your event director. So the person, if that's probably you, if you're here, like you'll be the one organizing it, and then one other. Your umpire team, you've got your chief umpire and the other umpires. Onshore team, so somebody on changeover to just make sure that the right teams are getting into the right boats. Whether this can change like depending on how you do it, so you might have a changeover whereby you have to get into ribs and go out to the boats, or you may do it from a pontoon. Obviously depending on that changes like the number of people that you need on changeover, a beach master to sort of coordinate and make sure that everything's going on all right, and then bosun and your damage officer, just to do repairs, wear and tear, just like check all the boats are in good condition. And then on the water team, you've got your start boat, finish boat, course manager. Umpires might not like this, but typically if you're limited with ribs, umpires are usually quite happy to help manage the course as long as it's set pretty okay at the beginning of the day. And then any other roles, so the first aid officer, quite a few clubs require that, that you have someone that's sort of designated, although typically, as a lot of uni sailors are DIs anyway, a lot of people have their first aid runner, so that's sort of anybody just to do miscellaneous jobs, and also a media officer to just like run media. So helpers rota, I kind of just have already said sort of the roles. So I think the key things about this is obviously some clubs find that they struggle to get volunteers because people want to do it. So it's just got to be fun. Like rotate the roles so people aren't getting bored, make sure people are kind of doing around about what they want to be doing, or if they're not doing what they're doing, they're rotating all the time. Think about the weather, like if it's cold, like obviously extra rotations, like hot drinks, snacks, sweets, like just make it like nice for them. Have someone reliable on start and finish boat. That'll help you when you're running it during the day. Like if you've got someone that you know what they're, if they know what they're doing, then you can just relax a bit. The same person on results for consistency, we kind of recommend that, like although it's not too confusing the spreadsheet, it just means that you've got the same person doing it, so hopefully there won't be any confusion. And then we also recommend having the same damage officer all day and make sure that they note down and photograph any damage immediately, just so that it's quite consistent. So here's an example of like a template. We will like happily send this afterwards, but kind of recommend a couple on start boat, at least maybe 3 on finish boat. So you have one person looking at the line, one person writing down and want a backup person writing down as well. We found at the summer champs it's really helpful having 2 people write down on different sheets, so if there's any inconsistencies in it, you can compare notes basically, and yeah, make sure you've got the right result written down. Bosun and damage officer, it is good if they're separate, because if it's a windy weekend, the bosun will be quite busy, and you want your damage officer just to be focused on making sure they're noting down exactly what's happening. So yeah. So the pre-event preparations. So week before sales, do you know where they are? Make sure that you've got all the sails together, they're all the same color, same flight. Also make sure you have enough cut downs. It's very typical for a cut down to go missing a few days before, so just make sure you've got them a week before and you won't worry.
Can I
do you have enough?
In with the
Oh, hello.
You need to have the right number of battens as well.
Yes.
Check your battens.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And if you've got an odd number of battens, I think the general line is to just take them all out, so that it's fair. Do you have enough volunteers? Are all flights able to get to the venue? So like with transport, you may have to help with transport. I know just Bristol as an example, we don't have anyone with the tow bar at the moment, which is a nightmare. So like even things like that are worth thinking about. Do you have enough spares? And also a week before, are the radios charged, and do you have enough to make sure obviously that they're going to be charged? So that's also something to look at the day before as well. And then day before, do your umpires and volunteers know what time to be at the club? Do your teams know what time to arrive for registration and briefing? Do the ribs have fuel? Check the forecast, because if it's going to be super windy, it might be worth rethinking. Do the teams know their allocated accommodation details? And Kate has put in capitals postcode, really important to make sure they go to the right place. A top tip from me, for each team racing event that I've done, I put together volunteer packs, which is basically like a folder, a waterproof folder, and inside that you just have everything that the person would possibly need. So like for start boat, you have paper, start sheets, a copy of the NOR, copy of the SIs, and then just pencils, pens, and just loads of sweets and a clipboard, which just like if you have a pack for everything, it just means that you can just hand it out easily. You know that everyone has the information they need and the resources they need, and people will just happily get on with it. So yeah. Hey, do you want to go?
Yeah. So on the day of the event, you need to make sure you print off and distribute all schedules. We often find it useful to also have a set of schedules printed up somewhere that's easily seeable, like on the event notice board. So it's useful to bring a printer here, and also you need to know whether your club has Wi-Fi or not as to how to connect the printer and whether that's available, and also how to communicate with your results boat. You need to collect your damage deposits at registration, and you need to brief your volunteers. I'd recommend briefing your volunteers before you brief the sailors, so just they know where they're going, any questions they can answer, you can answer. Yeah, and you can distribute all radios for communication. Make sure at this point you tell them which channel they need to be on, rather than just handing them a radio and just hoping that it's on the right one. You also need to run a sailors briefing. That will be with the race officer and the chief umpire as well. And that's including things like weather. Don't forget to tell them to sail out of the way of the race course when they're not racing, and anything special like that. You also need to ensure your catering's set up and they're all happy. We find the more we communicate with the caterers, the better, like more friendly they are, because they know what's going on. So it makes for a much easier event. But yeah.
Just on the in terms of how results for the volunteers, how you communicate results, something that's worked really well in a couple of events that we've put on is a WhatsApp group with all the sort of the volunteers in, and then the person on results, and then you can just take pictures of the sheets and just send them over. Obviously, I know some venues don't have great internet connection, so it very much depends on where you are as to how you want to do it. So looking after the boats, So as we've sort of already said, designate a damage officer who'll manage them. So complete the KSL Firefly checklist at the beginning and end of each day. So this checklist we will send afterwards. It just includes sort of all the things in a Firefly, and you can go through each boat and each flight, and it's just good to do before you start each day and at the end of each day, and then you can compare. So if something goes wrong, something goes missing and you're not sure when it was, it should be noted on there, and then you can go back to the other checklist and make sure you're happy. Before you start, take pictures of the boats and any existing marks, wear and tear. It's worth doing that. So say you're running the event and you're borrowing boats from someone else, it's worth doing it with the club that also own those boats. So a representative from each goes around and does it, and make sure you're all happy with it beforehand. And pictures are really key, because if you have any disputes, like, you've got some evidence, and that's what you need. Keep a damage log and briefly inspect boats at each changeover. So your damage officer should just, like, briefly look over. You'd expect, so in the briefing you say, if there's damage, let this person know. You'd expect them to let them know, but at the end of the day, if like that doesn't happen, you just have to keep an eye on them yourselves. And then our probably biggest piece of advice, just ensure there's open communication between yourselves and the boat lenders, because at the end of the day, they're doing you a massive favor, and we just all want to look after the boats and make sure there aren't any damages. So I've included at the bottom, you can see the damage log. This is from KSL as well. All these documents are from Keith, but we can also share them. So race, boats involved, teams, reported damage, outcome checked. So all the info you're going to need if you're going to need to follow it up afterwards with a repair.
Yeah. So after the event, one thing for sure is to have a good sleep, because you might not have got that much sleep over the last couple of days. You need to make sure you thank your umpires, race officials, the affiliated club, and all your volunteers. You need to check your finances and everything's settled up. Like on Emma's slide with the budget on it, you might want to see how much you've actually spent and work it out so that you can improve on that next year, taking all the efficiencies you can. You need to make sure you follow up on any damages and hand flights back over. So it might be that a team chooses to tow away a set straight after the event. So you need to make sure that flight is properly packed up. I know it's a bit of a pain, but if you're lending a set of boats, I'd highly recommend labeling stuff, because it's strange what can go missing, and a lot of rudders look the same. So just worth labeling stuff before you go. You need to write an event report, so you can either ask someone who was at an event to write that, or add a comment, or you can do it yourself. And you need to upload all your socials, photos, and all your racing photos to social media, because that's obviously the best part.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so in summary, this is kind of like a broad timeline. We've tried to include everything. So first thing, confirm the date with the venue and appoint a race officer. If you don't normally do this, you might have your event director that does this. I can't recommend enough. If you can just focus on organising the event, and the race officer can focus on making sure the racing's going smoothly. Write a budget, release your NOR and entry forms and event promotion, add a boozer calendar, appoint umpires and sort their accommodation, secure your flights to boats and get your signed hire agreements. Also consult your SU. Once you've confirmed your entries, contact Keith about schedules, make a volunteers rota, ensure everything is ready the week before the event, and finally, the key thing really is to have fun.
So yeah, there's a couple of other things you might want to think about. So parking, where are all your sailors going to park? You're going to keep them separate from your umpires, etc., so that the umpires can get out. Who else is going to be using the lake? Do you have sole use of it, or is the club racing coming on Sunday? Where are they going to park? Where are they going to rig? Just making sure you're giving them enough space. Catering, making sure that they can cater the right amount of people. Is all going okay? Just keeping close contact with them. If you want to focus on sustainability, having a water refill point is really good. And encouraging use of takeaway reusable mugs and stuff like that, and avoiding single-use plastic cutlery, really good. You might want to think about sponsorship. So this could be the prizes of the whole event. Just maybe some local companies might want to get involved. worth sending a few emails out, because it will save you maybe about 100 quid on your budget if you can get them prizes sponsored. You need to think about your prizes. So what are you actually going to give the first, second, third? Are you going to do a different team prize, a social prize as well? You need to think about your social tickets and your socials. So we typically use events to like collect all our university sailing club people who want to come, and then we work out how many social tickets each sailing team wants to bring as well. I recommend also distributing some contact numbers, so say for an organizer or the race officer, just in case someone gets lost on the way down or has an emergency, just so it's easy to keep in contact with you.
Yeah, just on the social tickets, I think I mentioned it earlier before, but I can't emphasize enough how if you're going to have a big social, make sure you contact venues really, really early, because especially post-COVID, venues might be quite reluctant. They're trying to make as much money as they can, and you know, students might not be the best customers, but also yeah, the earlier the better, and the less stress it'll be for either you or the social sex or however you run your event social. So like essentially we said it already, like have fun. Like our advice really is like the more prep you do in advance, the less stressful for the end, the more fun you have. So essentially the ideal situation you want to be in is that you've done the enough prep beforehand, you know exactly what's going to happen, who's going to be where, you've got backup in case, you've got enough volunteers in case somebody can't make it, and it should just run for you. And you can just make sure that everything's happening how it should. Obviously that's an ideal scenario and doesn't always happen, but essentially it is very true. The more prep you do, the less stressed you'll be, and the more fun you'll have, because essentially everybody just wants to be out of the water and doing some fun team racing, and having a really good social. So yeah, that's kind of like the most important things. Finally, so we've got a partnership with Keith at KSAIL. Has loads of great resources that can help run team racing events. So he has asked, the link is below here, if you sign up following the link, oh goodness me, if you sign up following the link, then you can get access, have your account, and he can provide you with support. He provides spares for events, he can do repairs. Like, it's well worth contacting Keith if you haven't already, because he's just like got a wealth of information and is so helpful. So yeah, finally, thank you for joining us. And are there any questions? The floor is literally open. If you might not have any questions, I don't know. Let's see, maybe Kate, should we close it and then let me stop sharing. Okay. Any questions? No. If we have no questions, we can finish. But
just one last word, just to check that everyone put their email address in the chat box so that we can send you out all these resources afterwards.
Yeah.
And if you put your uni down as well, that'd be really useful, so we know who we're speaking to, sending them out to, and who's here, who's not here.
Yeah. I hope it's been helpful. It'd be great if you have any feedback, or you think we've missed something, or like just want to get in touch. It would be great to have some feedback, because obviously this is the first time we've done this. I think it's pretty good, not too many internet problems, so so it's right. So yeah, lovely. All right, well, I'll just give it another minute. If nobody has anything else they want to add, or if you've got any other tips and stuff that works, please do also shout. This is just a space to help, really. Yeah. And also, don't forget, if you want to be team racing officer, please let us know. Also match racing officer as well. It's good for your CV, you get a free jacket. Like, yeah.
It's not that much work, and like it's quite a fun committee. This is my second year now on it. Like, yeah, you basically got qualifiers already partly organised for you this year, because the bidding process has already happened. So yeah.
And it's essentially, yeah, it's just essentially supporting people in running events to get us all team racing. So yeah. I think, oh, Rob's back. If no one's got any more questions, then I think let's leave it there. Thank you everyone for joining. We will share it on all our channels. Hopefully it's recorded okay. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send them over to us. You've got all our emails, like all our details are like all over our social media, so just get in touch. We'd love to help you. So yeah, have a lovely rest of your evening, and yeah, we will all hopefully see you on the water soon. Cool, amazing. Should we go?
Thank you, guys.